Hi, everyone. I'm Vladimir Dutip. We are watching all the news happening in the United States and around the world. Check out these monitors behind me. These are feeds coming into the CBS News Broadcast Center from all of our stations and affiliates across the country. If it's happening out there, I'm going to bring it to you live right here. Let's begin. The U.S. Embassy in Kyiv has shut down after threats of an attack from Russia. We're following the fast-moving developments from Ukraine's capital. And in just a few hours, the House Ethics Committee will meet to discuss whether to publicly release its report on sexual misconduct allegations by former Congressman Matt Gaetz. The Attorney General pick will also be on the Hill trying to rally support for his nomination. Plus, we're tracking the deadly bomb cyclone as it knocks out power and destroys homes across the Northwest. We'll have the latest forecast. This is CBS News 24/7. Ukraine's capital is under an air raid alert in anticipation of possible Russian airstrikes. Moscow is upping the ante after President Biden authorized Kyiv to use U.S.-supplied long-range missiles to attack Russia. The alert comes just hours after the U.S. State Department closed its Kyiv embassy due to, quote, specific information of a potential significant air attack. Meanwhile, Russia claims to have shot down 50 Ukrainian drones overnight near the Kursk region. CBS News senior foreign correspondent Holly Williams has the very latest.
Ukraine fired 8 American-made ATACMS into Russia, according to U.S. officials. A video posted online appears to show a launch, though we cannot independently verify it. The target was a military facility in the Bryansk region of southern Russia, according to the Russian Defense Ministry. U.S. officials believe the Russians may have shot down 2 of the missiles, which have a maximum range of close to 200 miles. President Biden gave permission to Ukraine to use ATACMS deep inside Russian territory 3 days ago. Before that, the Ukrainians were only allowed to use them against Russian forces in Ukraine because of concerns the powerful weapons could further escalate this conflict. The Kremlin, though, seems to be stoking fears of an escalation. Vladimir Putin approved a change in Russia's nuclear doctrine yesterday, lowering the threshold for a nuclear strike. A U.S. official called that, quote, irresponsible rhetoric. The U.S. decision to allow Ukraine a broader use of the ATACMS came after more than 10,000 North Korean troops were deployed to Russia, bolstering Moscow's forces. Some of those North Korean soldiers are now seeing combat, and North Korea has sent additional weapons to Russia, according to a South Korean official. Back to you.
Let's bring in CBS News senior national security correspondent Charlie D'Agata. Charlie, so what do we know about Russia's attack plan, and is the U.S. planning to offer any support to Ukraine's defense?
Well, Vlad, good morning to you. In terms of what we know, all we've been told is that to prepare for a significant air attack. You know, it's important to note that Holly and her team, I saw them this morning, they were hunkering down in a shelter. We don't normally do that. I mean, the air raid sirens go off all the time in Ukraine. You'd never come out. And the Ukrainians themselves tend not to go into bunkers or into shelters unless they're close to the front line. So that sort of underlines the seriousness of that. So a significant air attack, that could be cruise missiles, it could be aircraft, but it could be major, and especially in the city itself. So it's worth bracing for that. It's also notable that the U.S. Embassy is closed down. In fact, most of the embassies have closed down in expectation of that Russian retaliation. Now, in a broader sense, what are they preparing for in terms of the Russian attack? The Russians have been pushing in the east. They want to retake Kursk. They've got the North Koreans there. As far as what the Americans can supply, look, what they've got there right now in terms of defense is all they can do. There hasn't been anything they can do at this point to bolster air defenses for what's already in the country, but they are desperate for it. I mean, they need a lot more than they have at the moment.
And Charlie, let me ask you about Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin, who said that there is a new presidential drawdown authority for Ukraine being announced later today. What's that all about?
Yeah, so Vlad, you know, not to be too cynical about this, but these things happen all the time, right? These drawdowns. It has to do with the budget and how many weapons and delivery and stockpiles that the United States has bid for the Ukrainians, and this would be, I know it's $275 million is what will be announced in this particular package, which is a lot to you and me, but it's a fraction of about $7 billion in a drawdown that they're trying to take care of before, like, January 20th in terms of resupplying. So what are they? I've got it right here. Ammunition for the HIMARS, we've discussed that. Artillery, that's a huge one. Mortar rounds, unmanned aerial systems, anti-tank, small arms and ammunition, spare parts. I mean, it's big, but it's nowhere near what the Ukrainians need, and it's just a fraction of what's been promised by the United States to deliver. And we've also talked about the ATACMS and those launch pads. That would be the HIMARS, and they're going to need more of that and more artillery, because that's what they're facing now. They're facing an artillery war in the Kursk region. They're facing an artillery war in eastern Ukraine around Prokofsk. And there has been an acceleration on both sides, partly because of the political cycle that we're in. Both the Russians and the Ukrainians aren't quite sure what this new administration is going to bring to this battle, and there's a sort of hurry-up offense. And again, we have to keep reminding people, but we're heading into the winter. There's always this surge in fighting before that happens.
All right, and Charlie, and can you update us on the landmine situation there?
Yeah, so this is notable, and it's worth pointing out here. So the United States is actually, I have to make clear that the Defense Secretary didn't necessarily say that these landmines are part of this new PDA, the new drawdown. He didn't want to comment on that or whether it had been pre-planned. But as we all know, landmines are a sensitive issue, and these are anti-personnel. Okay, so the United States has supplied Ukraine with, mechanized landmines, things to take out tanks, anti-tanks, and in vehicles. These are specifically for personnel. And it's the first time we've seen this. So, as it was pointed out, because they want to make clear that these particular landmines, they're called non-persistent. So they become inert after a preset period of time, anywhere from 4 hours to 2 weeks. They're electrically fused. When the battery dies, essentially, so does the landmine. Because, of course, the big controversy is that the whole place is littered with landmines. The Russians certainly have littered Ukraine with landmines, and they stick around, and they make victims of civilians, children who stumble upon them years, sometimes decades after they're laid. These are non-inert. In theory, they're supposed to switch off and lose their lethality within hours.
All right, Charlie Daggett reporting from the Pentagon for us this morning. Charlie, as always, we thank you, my friend. Appreciate it.
Thanks, bud.
All right, in just a few hours, the House Ethics Committee could decide if it will release the findings on the investigation into sexual misconduct allegations against former Congressman Matt Gaetz. That panel was supposed to meet last Friday for a vote, but that was postponed. President-elect Trump is standing behind his Attorney General pick for now. CBS News congressional correspondent Scott MacFarlane is on Capitol Hill, and he joins me now to discuss. So interesting, Scott. We've been talking about this ever since the president-elect announced Gaetz as his pick for defense secretary. What are you hearing from Congress? I mean, this whole game of chicken, whether or not you're going to see the Senate in its advise and consent role pushing back on the president-elect, who claims and says that because of his historic win, that he has a mandate to push through his picks. What are you hearing?
Begin with Matt Gaetz, because Matt Gaetz is truly here at the Capitol today, meeting with senators, trying to salvage his prospects of being the nation's next attorney general. It's 2 months from today that President-elect takes office, but this is already a pivotal day for Matt Gaetz's future, an inflection point, not just because he's taking these meetings amid concern from both parties about what is in that House ethics investigation of Gaetz, but the House Ethics Committee that produced that report is meeting early this afternoon in Washington, potentially having a vote to decide whether to release that report publicly. What's in that report? Senators certainly want to know, but we know the parameters of this investigation. It began in April 2021 into allegations of sexual misconduct and illicit drug use by Gaetz, allegations he has unambiguously denied. But the findings of this report could inform senators about whether he should be the nation's top law enforcement officer. But here's the trick, Vlad. As he goes office to office talking to senators, does he meet with some of the potentially harder line votes, ones that may be more difficult for him to get, including any Democrats, and some of the Republicans who have defied Trump in the past? Maine Senator Susan Collins, Alaska Senator Lisa Murkowski. Oh, by the way, Mitch McConnell is a rank-and-file senator again in January. He has a vote. The Republicans can lose just 3 and have Matt Gaetz get through. Then there's the matter of the House Ethics Committee. Will it make that vote today to release its findings? It's a 5 versus 5 committee. 5 Republicans, 5 Democrats. A Republican would have to join the Democrats to make this happen, and that's unpredictable.
All right, let's talk about Vice President-elect J.D. Vance, who's also arrived. He's there with Gaetz. It's his second day of courting lawmakers. And I know, as has been reported by you and others, Scott, that the president himself is calling lawmakers. There is some reporting out there that perhaps they are concerned, not just about Matt Gaetz, but about Pete Hegseth. And I misspoke earlier when I said that Gaetz was up for defense secretary. He's up for attorney general. It's Hegseth that's up for the Department of Defense head honcho job. What are you hearing about his chances?
Yeah, same dynamic, a different acuity to it, Vlad. I mean, there are concerns from both parties about experience level for Pete Hegseth, somebody who most recently is a weekend morning host on cable news and would be assigned and prescribed the duties of managing the largest bureaucracy in America, if not the world, with millions of employees, with a worldwide footprint, with contractors, with interests in so many different fields. He'll have to answer those questions. There are also concerns about some of the allegations against him, which he denies, of sexual misconduct. A lot of questions senators have. We'll see how fast they get the answers.
All right, Scott McFarland, as always, my friend, we appreciate you. Thank you very much. The president-elect is moving forward with his selections for administration nominees. Yesterday, he announced former wrestling executive and former head of the Small Business Administration, Linda McMahon, as his Secretary of Education, a department he claims he wants to disband. He also chose another TV personality, Dr. Mehmet Oz, to run Medicare and Medicaid. I want to bring in CBS News political correspondent Caitlin Huey-Burns for more. So Trump has chosen people, Caitlin, who have been strong supporters of him and who, you know, there's this notion of, do they look the part? Do they look and act like in the mind of what the president-elect thinks a person in that role should look and act like? In other words, he likes TV people, which is the world that he came from. So what are you hearing?
Yeah, Vlad, that's exactly right. And something to kind of keep in mind about Donald Trump, the way that he kind of came into kind of our cultural memory was through television. And so it's no surprise that he is selecting people who have been, you know, have had a prolific presence on television. And that's in part, too, because this incoming administration wants people in their orbit to be able to be on TV in defense of the president-elect's policies. We saw that time and time again over the course of the campaign. And Trump is pretty much almost done filling out his cabinet. We're expecting him to make those final decisions for the leftover positions, Treasury Secretary included, by Thanksgiving, which is next week. But he's also approaching this, Vlad, very differently than he did 8 years ago when he was coming in without any sort of experience in government. And just talking to voters of his over the course of the year, you know, a lot of them would remark that they were disappointed in the choices that Trump made, but they blamed kind of establishment Republicans for those choices in the first term. You know, people like Mattis and Kelly and others that, you know, left Trump's orbit and were very critical of him. And so there is a kind of feeling among the base, and especially base Republicans on Capitol Hill, that the president-elect is entitled to whoever he wants to pick.
All right, let's talk about Linda McMahon. Now, I know that I've been watching social media, and there's a lot of people sharing video of her in the WWE ring, you know, getting slapped by her daughter, and you know, all that wrestling stuff that people love. But she's already been vetted. She's already had a role. She was the head of the Small Business Administration during the first Trump presidency, first Trump administration. But Department of Education is, you know, this is a department that Republicans and the president-elect have talked about dismantling and taking it apart. We haven't heard much from her about what she would do if she were to be confirmed, but what are you hearing?
Yeah, and she's the co-chair of his transition team, which is an important note here. Look, the Department of Education has been a punching bag for Republicans. They have long wanted to get rid of it, and Trump has said as much as well. Obviously, this would need approval from Congress, and that has always been an uphill climb and would remain so. But something important to note about the Department of Education is that 90% of the funding for education comes from local governments, and the Department of Education doesn't provide curriculum. That's also done at the local level. So there are a lot of misconceptions about what the Education Department does, but it has been an agency that Republicans have long tried to get rid of, going back to when President Carter first started it.
All right, Caitlin Huey-Burns will be watching. Thank you, my friend. Appreciate it. Pacific Northwest is getting hit with one of the strongest storms in decades. One person has already been killed. The powerful bomb cyclone, as it's called, is getting stronger, and it is slamming Northern California, Oregon, and Washington state with heavy rain, hurricane-force winds, and flooding. Hundreds of thousands of customers have already lost power. CBS News Bay Area reporter Veronica Macias is live from Santa Rosa, California, with more on this. Veronica, just tell us what you're seeing just several hours into the storm.
Good morning. Right now, the rain coming down pretty good here in the city of Santa Rosa. And within the last hour at this municipal yard, we've seen people coming by and still trying to prepare to protect their homes, grabbing sandbags, which is why you don't see much of that sand behind me here at this yard at this hour. We had a couple of men coming by in a truck bed, and they were filling up their truck bed with sand out here. And we know there's a limitation, but there's also a big concern, those individuals living in low-lying areas. So they're trying to do the best they can. We did call out to the city, and we know they're going to be coming out and putting more sand for families who are still interested in protecting their property. And we know that low-lying areas in Sonoma County right now are facing a threat of flooding in their homes. We know that streams and creeks in this area are prone to flooding when we get rain like is expected this week.
All right, Veronica, thank you very much. Stay safe out there. Appreciate it. Let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Grant Gilmore with the first look at the national forecast. Grant.
Hey, good morning, Vlad. The good news, though, is that this very deep area of low pressure, the bomb cyclone, will start to move away from the Pacific Northwest. So we should start to see some of those wind speeds gradually relax as we go throughout the day today. We've already seen wind gusts in excess of 75, nearly 80 miles per hour. So power outages are a concern. Travel disruption, that's ongoing. That's only going to continue as we head through the next several days. But flooding, that concern is only going to increase as we go through the next couple of days. Let me show you why. We'll see very heavy rainfall. In fact, some places could pick up 10 to 15 inches of rain in Northern California. We might even see 20 inches of rain, and this is just over the matter of a couple of days. Meanwhile, we've got another low pressure system impacting the Midwest and the Northeast. This is going to bring very beneficial rainfall to the Northeast as we go through tonight. The backside of the storm system is going to bring in the cold air. That cold air digs in behind that low pressure system as it spins into the Northeast, and that will offer the opportunity for not just some snow, but we're talking inches of snow. Some places in the higher elevations could pick up 10, maybe 15 inches of snow. So both coasts, Vlad, dealing with pretty strong storm systems, especially when you start talking about the snow and the heavy rainfall. Back to you.
All right, Grant, my friend, thank you very much. We'll check in with you a little bit later. Coming up, a new development to a story that rocked the nation 3 decades ago. Why a woman convicted of killing her 2 children is now up for parole. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. The defense has rested its case, and closing arguments are underway in the murder trial of Jose Ibarra. He is the undocumented migrant accused of killing nursing student Laken Riley in a case that dominated the immigration debate in the 2024 election. CBS News producer Jared Eggleston is live outside the courtroom and joins me now. Jared, what are we hearing?
Vlad, good morning. The closing arguments came relatively quickly this morning. The defense got the case yesterday, and they called about 3 witnesses before we had to break for the evening this morning. They came in and told the judge, we're ready to rest. We're done presenting witnesses. So the prosecution came back up and has started to deliver the closing arguments. And in those closing arguments, they've really been going through all the evidence pretty bluntly at times. The prosecutor at one point said, you know, you would have to not believe your eyes to not find Jose Ibarra guilty. I want you to listen to some of what else they've had to say so far.
that he killed her because she would not let him rape her. And look no further. You have to look no further to his actions 73 minutes before he encountered her on the trail to know what he was up to that day. And so not only does the physical
And so, Vlad, you can hear that they're talking about the physical evidence, but they also have a trove of phone evidence and also smartwatch evidence, location data. So that is why the prosecution at this point is feeling very strong about their case. They've been in their closing arguments for about half hour now, 20 minutes to a half hour. We expect the defense will give their statements, and then ultimately, Vlad, within the next few hours, the judge will have the case and ultimately will make the decision on if Jose Ibarra is guilty of killing Laken Riley.
So we know Jose Ibarra, Jared, has declined to testify. There's no jury involved here. So this is up to the judge, right?
Yes, it is. And yesterday, the judge gave Jose Ibarra the opportunity to testify once the prosecution rested its case. So through an interpreter, the judge went through the pros and cons and asked him if his attorneys had gone over those with him. And he nodded his head yes and said that he did not want to testify in his own defense.
All right, Jared Eggleston for us this morning. Jared, we'll check in with you a little bit later. All right, for now, though, let's get to this story of South Carolina woman who was convicted of drowning her children 30 years ago. Is she now getting her first possibility at freedom? Susan Smith is set to appear before the State Parole Board, and our Skylar Henry takes a look back at the case that gained international attention. Watch.
Your mama loves you so much.
It was a made-for-TV true crime drama that gripped the nation. For more than a week, Susan Smith pleaded for the return of her two young sons, Michael and Alex.
I think it takes a very sick and emotionally unstable person to be able to take two beautiful children like that, to be able to keep them from their parents.
The 1994 Union, South Carolina tale of a carjacking led to an extensive manhunt by police.
I stopped at a red light and just out of nowhere, this black guy came up and just opened the door and jumped in the car.
Smith, who was 23 at the time, claimed a black man carjacked her at gunpoint and took her sons.
But 9 days into the investigation, Smith confessed to the murders. She admitted to letting her car roll into this lake with Michael and Alex still in their car seats.
Susan Smith has been arrested and will be charged with 2 counts of murder in connection with the deaths of her children.
Tommy Pope prosecuted the case.
She was enjoying the media attention until the media attention turned on her.
Pope sought the death penalty, and in 1995, Smith was sentenced to life.
Some of the jurors said that they believed that it would be more punishment for her to be remorseful, to be in prison for the rest of her life, thinking about what she did to Michael and Alex. And I can respect that. The fallacy there is twofold. One, unbeknownst to them, she's not there for the rest of her life. Number two, she's been focused on Susan for her 30 years. Susan has not focused on Michael and Alex.
That was our Skylar Henry reporting. The parole board tells CBS News it has received nearly 500 letters calling for Smith's parole to be denied. And as of last night, only 6 letters calling for her release. We'll have more on this case after Smith testifies. All right, 3 years after a fatal shooting on the set, Rust makes its world premiere at a film festival today. Coming up, who is boycotting the premiere and why? You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Here's a look at some of the top stories we're following this morning. The Los Angeles City Council has passed a sanctuary city law in preparation for the mass deportations promised by President-elect Donald Trump. The ordinance prevents local resources from being used in federal immigration enforcement. Los Angeles is the latest in a growing number of cities passing similar ordinances, despite threats of potential federal sanctions once Trump takes office. A federal judge overseeing the Sean Diddy Combs case has reportedly ordered prosecutors to destroy several pages of handwritten notes taken from his jail cell. Federal authorities obtained the notes during a massive raid at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn. Combs is currently being held there without bail ahead of his upcoming sex trafficking trial. He has pleaded not guilty to all charges. And Alec Baldwin's Western film Rust is set to make its world premiere today at a film festival in Poland, 3 years after a fatal on-set shooting. You'll remember cinematographer Helena Hutchins was shot and killed during production in 2021 when a revolver Baldwin was handling went off. A New Mexico judge dismissed an involuntary manslaughter charge against Baldwin earlier this year. The film's armorer was sentenced to 18 months in prison for the same charge. Hutchins' mother is boycotting today's premiere, accusing Baldwin of attempting to profit from her daughter's death. All right, now more on our top story. We are monitoring Ukraine's capital is under an air raid alert in anticipation of a possible Russian airstrike. Moscow is upping the ante after President Biden authorized Kyiv to use U.S.-supplied long-range missiles to attack Russia. CBS News Chief White House correspondent Nancy Cordes is joining us now from the White House to talk more about this. Hi, Nancy. So the White House is surging and sending aid to Ukraine. And what has the president said about why he decided to allow the Ukrainians access to these long-range missiles at this time? He's only got a couple of months left in office.
Well, the official line, Vlad, is that it is because of the presence now of North Korean troops on the battlefield assisting the Russians. U.S. officials say that's what prompted them to finally give the Ukrainians what they had long been seeking, which were long-range missiles which could be fired into Russian territory. And in fact, the Ukrainians finally used those long-range weapons for the first time yesterday, striking a weapons depot deep into Russia. And that, of course, is going to have repercussions and implications, which is exactly the reason that the U.S. held off for as long as it did. Now you have U.S. officials closing the U.S. embassy in Kyiv today because they're worried about a major airstrike. They are having all of their U.S. embassy employees shelter in place. They're even being urged to stockpile food. But it's hard not to read into this decision by the U.S., Vlad, to finally approve these long-range weapons for Ukraine as a message being sent not just to U.S. allies, but also to the incoming Trump administration about the importance of continuing to support Ukraine in this fight going forward.
Let me also ask you, Nancy, about Secretary Lloyd Austin saying that there is more U.S. money on the way for Ukraine to meet some of their critical battlefield needs. So how much are we talking about, and will that include more weapons?
We're talking about $275 million that had already been approved. And yes, it includes a lot of weapons, including drones and rocket launcher ammunition. And we've also learned, Vlad, that for the first time, the U.S. is going to be providing Ukraine with anti-personnel landmines. The Pentagon had provided anti-tank landmines in the past, but they say that this is a reflection of how the war is being waged now. You've got more Russian troops on foot, and so these anti-personnel mines are specifically designed to repel them.
And Nancy, today is the president's birthday. There was kind of a humorous video that was making the rounds yesterday on social media as the president was leaving, getting on Air Force One. There was a reporter from the White House press corps, maybe a producer, saying, "Mr. President, will you answer a question for us on your birthday?" And he didn't answer any questions. But I get the point. He didn't take any questions at all, really, on that trip. Right. To that G20 meeting. So what is he doing to celebrate the birthday? And is he going to talk to the press at all in the weeks and months ahead?
Well, we certainly hope so. You get the sense that the reason that he didn't take any questions on that foreign trip, which he typically does when he's in a setting like that, is because he knows inevitably that a lot of the questions would be about his successor, Donald Trump, questions that he may not want to answer, particularly when he is overseas. As for what he's doing for his 82nd birthday, today, we have asked the White House. All we know is that he's going to be celebrating with family. He's probably got a pretty serious case of jet lag because he did fly home from Brazil overnight.
All right. Nancy Cordes, thank you very much. As always, my friend, appreciate it.
You got it.
Okay, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has offered a $5 million reward and safe passage out of Gaza to anyone who frees hostages being held by Hamas in the enclave. The proposal comes as the UN says virtually zero aid has reached northern Gaza amid an Israeli offensive in the area. And to the south, nearly 100 trucks were looted over the weekend. Our Elizabeth Palmer has more.
Israel's government is considering how best to stop the looting of aid in Gaza after a large convoy, 109 trucks, was robbed at gunpoint on Saturday by criminals. The UN is warning that food shortages in Gaza are becoming more acute, so every truckload of aid is precious. There is little to no security inside the Gaza Strip. The local Palestinian police force can't provide it because they're on the Israeli military's hit list. They were part at one time of the Hamas government before the war. But Israel's army rejects responsibility for Gaza's internal security too, and for protecting the aid trucks. On that, international aid organizations agree. They say having Israeli soldiers guarding the convoys would just make them an even bigger target for Hamas and also for criminals. So it's a very knotty problem. One of the solutions under consideration is to have private security companies protect the convoys, but that would be not only extremely dangerous, very tricky diplomatically. There's a little good news coming from Beirut today. It appears that Israel and Hezbollah are edging closer to a ceasefire. The U.S. envoy Amos Hochstein is due to leave Beirut soon and travel to Israel for meetings here tomorrow. Back to you.
All right, Liz, thank you very much. Tornado victims in Oklahoma are going on 3 weeks without any federal assistance. More than 600 properties were damaged in a single county, and people are encouraged to report damage online, though officials say claims are not guaranteed. The state broke the November record for tornadoes set back in 1958 with 23 and counting so far. Let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Grant Gilmore with another look at the national forecast.
Glad a very active pattern across the entire United States. We've got two significant storm systems, and then we can show them both to you at the same time here on the map. I want to bring on the radar, and we've got a relatively strong storm system now moving across the northern tier states. Now, that will continue to move to the east as we go through the next couple of days, bringing beneficial rainfall to the northeast. But this storm system brings gusty winds, potentially a decent amount of power outages as we go through today as it moves east tomorrow. Let's talk about the Pacific Northwest now, where we're continuing to deal with this bomb cyclone, bringing very gusty winds to portions of Oregon, into Washington, but then snow and then low elevation heavy rainfall to northern California. Let's talk about this bomb cyclone. We're talking about places picking up wind gusts 75 to nearly 80 miles per hour, all embedded within some very heavy rainfall that will actually increase as we go into tomorrow as another low pressure system begins to approach. The main strong bomb cyclone, which a bomb cyclone is essentially just a deep low pressure system that has increased in intensity, or that low pressure has dropped 24 millibars in 24 hours. We've seen that happen, and that's just indicating a very powerful storm. It's bringing heavy rainfall, flash flooding, heavy snow. Some places could see 2 to 4 inches of snow, in addition to upwards of nearly 20 inches of rainfall in some places in the lower elevations. That low pressure system will track to the north. Meanwhile, the atmospheric river pumps in all that Pacific moisture into northern California, southern Oregon, where again, that rainfall total is going to be significant. Look at all of this rain, 10 to 15 inches of rain. That's the concern for flooding that will go into the second half of the week into the weekend. There's your snowfall. Snowfall places could pick up nearly 2, if not 4 feet of snow through tomorrow. Then the East Coast, here comes the beneficial rain on the backside. We'll get some winter weather as well. Some places in the higher elevations from West Virginia into New York could see up to 15 inches of snow. Vlad, back to you.
Wow. All right. Grant Gilmore for us. Thanks, Grant. Former One Direction star Liam Payne has been laid to rest in England. His former bandmates were reportedly among the first mourners to gather for the private service, also paying tribute to Simon Cowell, who created and guided the group to stardom. Payne died after falling from the balcony of a Buenos Aires hotel last month. 3 people have been charged in the incident so far. The fight over Alex Jones's InfoWars is heating up. Details about a new lawsuit he's filing to stop The Onion from acquiring the company. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. All right, folks, we told you earlier closing arguments were underway in the Jose Ibarra trial. We heard from the prosecution earlier in the hour. Now it's the defense making its case. Let's dip in.
Nothing on that hat tested positive for his DNA. which goes to show that even if someone is wearing clothes, touching clothes, owning clothes, DNA is not always going to show up when the lab tests it. People in court wore gloves when they handled this evidence because they were afraid of cross-contamination. They were afraid that their touch would impact the reliability of future DNA tests.
All right, folks, once arguments are done, it is up to the judge to issue a verdict. Of course, we'll bring that to you as soon as it comes down. Let's move on. Attorneys for conspiracy theorist Alex Jones are suing the satirical news outlet The Onion and some Sandy Hook families over their deal to buy Jones's media empire, InfoWars. The Onion, with the support of families from the 2012 Sandy Hook Elementary School massacre, won a bankruptcy auction last week to buy InfoWars. Jones filed for bankruptcy after he was ordered to pay the families nearly $1.5 billion in defamation lawsuits. Jones' attorneys claim that there was fraud and collusion in the bankruptcy auction process. So that's another story that we're keeping our tabs on. Meanwhile, prosecutors are opposing efforts to have President-elect Donald Trump's conviction dismissed in his so-called hush money case out of New York. In a court filing yesterday, the Manhattan DA's office says Trump's return to the White House isn't grounds for dropping the case, but said they would accept freezing proceedings until after he finishes his second term in 2029. Earlier this morning, CBS News legal contributor Carolyn Polisi spoke to R. Errol Barnett about what the filing means in the case.
So what it means is, we heard yesterday from Alvin Bragg's office, the Manhattan DA, saying essentially to the judge how they think that they should move forward with this case. And in all likelihood, the judge will take that into consideration. First, they said that they will be opposing this forthcoming motion by President Trump's team to dismiss this case entirely. And their argument there is essentially that the case should go away because he is president-elect, based on really these constitutional principles embodied in the Supreme Court's reasoning that presidents should be immune from criminal prosecution. Well, they want to extend that to presidents-elect as well. Now, prosecutors noted that they would oppose that motion, meaning they want to keep this case intact. However, they would not be opposed to sort of, as you noted, putting this case in deep freeze for the next 4 years, essentially stopping this case in its tracks, maintaining the conviction, but having the sentencing move forward after those 4 years in office. Trump would then be 82 years old. It would be really unprecedented, but given sort of the unprecedented nature of this case, that's where we are.
Okay, what happens when Jelly Roll and Prince Harry team up? If you guessed a royal tattoo, you're spot on, right? Nice guess. We're going to show you the hilarious video next. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. There's no end in sight for the Culinary Workers Union strike at Virgin Hotels in Las Vegas. You'll recall workers are pushing for a 5-year contract with better wages and benefits. Virgin has hired hundreds of temporary workers to keep the resort running. I want to bring in CBS News reporter Andreas Gutierrez, who's joining me now from Las Vegas to talk more about this. So, Andreas, the union says they'll participate in civil disobedience beginning tomorrow. What will that look like?
Well, Vlad, no specifics as of yet, but they are saying that they are preparing to get arrested. Back in August, when contract talks were happening, there were 23 union members who ended up getting arrested after they gathered in front of the front entrance of the hotel, sat there and would not leave. Police ended up coming in and having to arrest them for trespassing. So that could be something similar that we see tomorrow. As you said, these workers are asking for a 5-year contract. They essentially want to see something very similar to what other properties on the Strip got back in November of last year, and that was about a $9 raise over those 5 years. They're saying that the hotel has come back with a contract that only gives them a couple of pennies, 30 cents, in the first 3 years, and then the rest of the money in the years 4 and 5. And so at this point, there have been no talks at the bargaining table since the strike began about 6 days ago.
A Formula One race is going to be held in Vegas. So how could the strike impact that event?
Well, yeah, the events that around race day do kick off tomorrow. And as you mentioned, they have hired temporary workers. So on the first day of the strike, the hotel says they had about 600 people come off the street and apply for these jobs. And there was such an influx of applications that they apparently had to turn some people away. So right now it's business as normal inside the operation here. But I'm being told by the hotel that they don't anticipate any of this striking workers to impact their normal operations here.
All right, Andres Gutierrez for us. Thank you, Andres. Appreciate it. Police are investigating the cause of that massive explosion in Ohio. Doorbell cameras captured the blast at the home in southeast Cincinnati yesterday. The house was leveled as debris flew through the neighborhood. Residents helped search through the rubble for victims. One man and a woman were found sadly, tragically dead. Another man was hospitalized. All right, something a little more lighthearted now. Prince Harry and country singer Jelly Roll are teaming up for next year's Invictus Games in Vancouver. They released a video yesterday promoting the games, which are an international sporting event for wounded and sick military service veterans. In this clip, Jelly Roll says he'll perform at the closing ceremony, but on just one condition. Dig it.
Let's go. Let's start. Where you want it? We got to go for the neck. The neck? Yes. I was thinking like my lower back or my No, nobody wants to see your Harry. No, that's the place where no one's going to see it.
And you wouldn't want nobody else doing this but me.
A small one, yeah. Like, whoa.
This is going to be huge, man. I'm telling you.
What's that?
It's awesome, right?
Is that your name? Does that say Jelly Roll?
No.
You put your name on my neck?
You know what? I gotta go. Thank you for your time. I'll see you in Vancouver, Prince.
Serious?
I'll be there. Appreciate you.
Appreciate you. Luckily for Prince Harry, the ink is not permanent. The up-and-coming Invictus Games are set to take place in Vancouver and Whistler, Canada in February. Okay, one of the greatest careers in the game of tennis has come to an end. Rafael Nadal retired after Spain was knocked out of the Davis Cup by the Netherlands yesterday. The 38-year-old legend previously said he would retire after that competition. Nadal was known as the King of Clay after winning the French Open a record 14 times on his way to 22 career Grand Slam titles. Let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Grant Gilmore with a final look at the national forecast. Hi, Grant.
Vlad, I remember the first time I saw Rafael play, years and years ago. Man, he a phenomenal player, a phenomenal person as well. So wishing the best to him as he heads off into retirement. As we head off into the West Coast, still tracking this powerful storm. I'll tell you what, this bomb cyclone followed by this atmospheric river is really a 1-2 punch for the West Coast, where we're already seeing some wind gusts in excess of 75 to nearly 80 miles per hour. Obviously, a heavy rainfall. We're going to get a lot of snow in the highest elevation as well. Some places could see over 4 feet. That's a lot of snow. So power outages, reduced travel conditions. Just take it easy if you're out there, especially traveling anywhere from Oregon into Northern California. Meanwhile, the active pattern continues from the central into the eastern half of the United States as we head through the coming days. You've got blizzard conditions over the Dakotas today with snow on the backside of this. The warm side of it's going to bring beneficial rainfall to the mid-Atlantic and the Northeast. And then on the backside, after round one, we'll get this low pressure system to just spin its wheels for a couple of days, and that will usher in colder air for the Appalachian Mountains into the north and east, and that will bring some snowfall. Some places getting their first snow of the season, and it could actually be quite a bit, especially in the higher elevations. Some places in North Carolina, Boone could see 3 inches of snow, but you head up into the high elevations of West Virginia, over a foot of snow, 15 inches of snow predicted. It doesn't look like we get accumulating snow into the Philly area, into New York, maybe a light dusting. The greater snow accumulations will be out to the west into portions of northern Pennsylvania into upstate New York. Vlad, back over to you.
All right, Grant, we'll check in with you tomorrow morning, my friend. Thanks very much. Folks, that does it for me, but stay right where you are. After the break, Elizabeth Cook is live from San Francisco with all the news breaking from coast to coast. This is CBS News 24/7.